watching us virtual. I am Minister Dawn Johnson. I'm one of the associates here at Center. I'm also the publicity chairperson, and tonight we are coming to you to present a mental health workshop. We know that our mental health is very important, and we have someone here tonight that's going to help us continue to have mental health stability in our life. So I'm not going to talk long because I'm going to give her all the time, um, all the time that she can have tonight. Amen. This is going to be Miss Reese Barnett.
Well, good evening, everyone. Okay, so we're going to see if I can drive tonight. Okay, so I was asked to speak with you guys about, if you don't mind, I'm going to put this up here, depression and anxiety, and I think suicide was also part of that discussion. All right, so I am a licensed clinical mental health counselor supervisor. I work with Integra as a regional lead for Gaston County doing school-based therapy, but I also own my own practice, and it's called Roundtable Coaching and Consulting. Okay, so do I have to point it back this way? It's not working. We'll use the mic. Okay. Okay, thank you. Okay, so seeing as how we are here at the church, right? I wanted to give a framework. One unique aspect of my practice is God has really gifted me with the unique ability to take the clinical information and pair it with the spiritual to show how it's all part of our being. Because we are mental, we're a body, right? We're our soul, which is our mind, will, and our emotions, and then we're spirit. So the scripture says, Beloved, I wish above all things that you would prosper and be in good health, even as your soul prospers. So clinically, we would say how you think influences how you feel, and how you feel affects what you do. It doesn't matter what order you do that in, all three of those are going to be connected. Okay? So I want us to understand that spirituality is an integral part of your mental health, right? How often in your Bible does it say Jesus went out by himself to pray? Right? Healing is to restore to a previous state or to remove what is harmful. And wholeness encompasses your body, your soul, and your spirit. And it means that you're going to function the way you were designed to function. Okay, that's going to help us fulfill our purpose. And so, one of my favorite scriptures is, So as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. You are what you think. Okay, so mental health affects every aspect of your life. So we have a graphic. Why? Because your your thinking, this ain't gonna work. Okay, your thinking will affect your body, stresses. So believe it or not, because again, you are a body, a soul, and a spirit. So you can get high blood pressure, you can get headaches, you can get digestive issues, you can get tension in your back, you can have all these things, eczema breakouts from stress. Okay, and that's all based on your thinking. So it's something called psychosomatic illness. That means you can have sicknesses, real symptoms, but the cause is strictly mental. So when people say like, "Oh, I'm in the doctor can't find nothing wrong," just might be stress related. Okay, so then we've got your emotions. So if you're like emotional, if you're angry, right? Your Bible says bitterness rots the bones, or laughter is good medicine, right? So there's that connection. And then your behavior. If you feel sad, are you going to really have much energy? You don't want to do nothing. So all of those are connected. Okay, so this is what it says. It says your behavior, what you do affects how you think and how you feel. And as you see, those arrows go both directions. So it doesn't really matter. You can act a certain way and that'll change how you feel. And then that'll change how you think. And then all of that is based on your core beliefs. It shapes what you believe. So your life experiences, your family traditions, all those things shape your worldview and how you relate to yourself, how you relate to other people, and how you relate to your environment. So these are some basic definitions I just want you guys to be acclimated to. What is mental health? That is the state of your emotional and mental well-being. When we talk about mental illness or mental disorder, we're talking about any change in thought, feeling, or behavior that impacts your ability to function. So you ever talk to a person that's depressed and they say, I can't get out of the bed, or I don't have any energy, or I'm just so tired. Like that's a disorder, okay? Crisis. This is when a person's actions or feelings or behavior causes harm to themselves or others, or they just are incapacitated and cannot take care of themselves at all. Some people can get to a place where they're so low, they don't practice hygiene anymore, they can't keep their job, and it's all mental. So, what's the stigma? This is what has plagued our community a long time, right? We think there's a negative perception of characteristics that we use about mental health. And this applies to other areas in life. You know, how many times have you been told, don't go see no shrink because, you know, I'm not crazy? Mm-hmm. Or taboo, something is forbidden. Ooh, that's kind of one of my soapbox issues, right? So before COVID, there was a stigma and people were very reluctant to seek help, especially people, and I mean no disrespect, this is just general conversation, but in church, because then people felt like, oh, well, you just need to pray about it, you fast about it, or my favorite, you know, just get the demon cast out. Now, am I telling you those things don't happen? They do. I'm a minister, they do happen. But I'm saying it's not all ways, right? It's a holistic approach. Okay, so then we have BIPOC. Learn this word. It means black and brown and indigenous people of color. Why does that matter? Because if you are going to seek treatment, you want somebody that understands you culturally because there are nuances to treatment. Okay, and as a black brown people, in your genetic code, you have been predisposed to trauma because of intergenerational trauma that has been passed down through slavery. So these are things like if somebody's going to treat you, they need to know because it's going to change the interventions they give you. It's not a one size fits all. Okay, so then what is a risk factor? That's any biological or psychological, family, community, or cultural characteristic that will increase your likelihood of a negative outcome. So, for instance, if I come from an environment of poverty, my likeliness of getting help or even going to a doctor is going to be way lower than somebody else that's meeting the median income. Okay, so the more risk factors a person has, the more predisposed they are to negative outcomes such as incarceration, domestic violence, etc., and etc. And there was a medical doctor, an African American woman actually. She lived in a poverty income a neighborhood, and she started noticing a pattern in all her patients, and she created what is called ACEs. And now it is a standard in medical practices where you do this little inventory to see what your risk factors are based on your living environment because they already know there are certain diseases that you are more likely going to be predisposed to based on those characteristics. So, what do I want you to know overall before we get into anxiety and depression? Mental illness does not make somebody crazy or a lunatic. It's not done for attention. It's not fake or pretend. I don't know anybody who wants to think that they're crazy. It's not a decision or a choice. You can't flip that on and off like a light switch. It's not a matter of will or control because I promise you, the people that suffer wish they didn't have to be bothered with it at all. And it's not a reflection of a person's level of faith. It's not that they didn't believe enough. You know, they didn't choose to be this way. Oh, we're going the wrong way. Let me drive. Okay, so I want to give you some. Let me go back. So I want you to understand this. Differentiate the person from the condition. Those are two separate things. Okay? A mental crisis is one of the most vulnerable times of an individual's life. So if somebody has come and they trust you enough to disclose that they are struggling, you need to be a safe space because that's a vulnerable moment for them. You cannot look at a person and know she or he has mental distress. This is why the world was so shocked when Twitch committed suicide. He looked happy, successful. What happened? How you respond impacts the outcome. So you may be the person that helps this person say, you know what, let me hold on a little more. Or you might be the person that pushed them over the edge. So when you're meeting somebody, just don't assume like you don't know what's making them act the way that they're acting. Okay? A lack of discernment and training do more harm than good. If you don't know, say you don't know and go get somebody that do know. Okay? It's not contingent on race, gender, sexuality, or socioeconomic status, and it is not one size fits all. Yes, ma'am. That it's not contingent on race, gender, sexuality, or socioeconomic status as far as like mental illness goes. It doesn't discriminate, right? It can be anybody. And it's not one size fits all. Because we can both have depression, but how it impacts me may look very different in you. There are over 200 forms of mental illness. You wait, it gets good. Oh, just wait a minute. 1 in 5, or 19.86% of adults experience mental illness, and that's according to Mental Health America, but only 50% get treatment or seek treatment. Adults recommended for mental health treatment increased from 21.6% in 2019 to 35% in 2021. 13.4 increase in 2 years. COVID, yes, ma'am. COVID did have some surface, but I think COVID really just brought to the surface what was already there. Okay. 3 out of 10 adults reported symptoms of anxiety or depression in 2020 compared to 1 in 10 in 2019. 1 out of 100 people die by suicide globally. People with severe mental disorders die 10 to 20 years earlier than the general population. Over 40% of people diagnosed with depression are at risk for developing coronary and metabolic disease. Depression and anxiety cost over $1 trillion in productivity due to absenteeism. Well, what about the church? 23% of your pastors have struggled with mental illness, but only less than half of them discuss it with the congregation. 65% of church-going family members would like to be able to openly talk about their mental health at church. 32% of churchgoers have been impacted by suicide. Only 4% of churchgoers that lost someone by suicide say their church leader was aware. 91% of Christians believe mental illness is stigmatized in the church. And out of that 91%, 30.5% believe mental illness is a spiritual problem. 29.4% believe it's a behavioral problem. And 19.7% believe it's demonic. Well, what about suicide? More than 48,000, or 132 people a day, or one person every 11 minutes dies by suicide in 2021. So then every 10 minutes, somebody was dying. In 2020, over 12 million people experienced suicidal ideation. The leading cause of death among children 10 to 14 years old. And that statistic for African American children is astronomical. It is the leading cause of death in Black children ages 10 to 12. And that is within the last 2 years. Yes, ma'am. There are 5 years old that commit suicide. Second most common cause of death in ages 10 to 34. The 10th leading cause of death in the U.S. increased 35% since 1999, and 90% of people who commit suicide showed mental health symptoms. So, what is depression? First of all, it's a medical illness that negatively affects the way you feel, think, and act. Symptoms have to be present for 2 weeks. So, what are some of those symptoms? Sadness, loss of energy, feeling worthless or guilty, changes in your appetite or sleep, isolating and withdrawing, difficulty thinking or concentrating, having a loss of interest. It can be debilitating. This is not the same thing as grief, okay? Because grief can cause sadness too. Grief comes in waves, but you don't lose your sense of self-esteem with grief. And the only time you have any suicidal ideation with grief was somebody who's like, oh, I want to go be with my loved one. So that's not the same thing as being depressed. What is anxiety? Excessive worry and overwhelming feeling of fear, dread, and uneasiness. This diagnosis right here is almost as normal as drinking water right now. I don't know a soul, I feel like, that does not have anxiety. I have never seen so many teachers with anxiety. So, symptoms: nervousness, restless, tension, sense of impending danger or panic or doom, increased heart rate, rapid breathing, sweating, trembling, feeling weak or tired, trouble concentrating, thinking, just checking out. Like physically in the building, but your mind is somewhere else. Some people have panic attacks with anxiety. What types of anxiety? Well, you have your general anxiety, which is the nervousness and the worry. But then some people get the panic disorder where they think they're dying or they just get frozen. They can't move because they're so overwhelmed. You have social anxiety where people are afraid to leave their homes or be in big crowds. You have separation anxiety. We normally see that in children. They're like terrified to leave a loved one. This happened a lot with COVID because kids were worried that their parents weren't going to come back home because they were going to get sick and die. Selective mutism, your anxiety can get so bad where a person can't talk. Your anxiety can become so debilitating that a person can't talk. Because you got to realize your brain and your nervous system work together. And when those signals are interrupted, things stop functioning. So when you're anxious, the left side of your brain is like your cortex. That's your reasoning, that's your logic, that's your thinking. Your right side, that's kind of more your creative space and emotional and all that. So when you get overwhelmed, the left part of your brain is offline. You cannot think. That's not anybody with anxiety, that's just in general, that's how we're designed. At that point, your fight or flight kicks in, your survivor brain kicks in. That part of your brain can't think, it can only react. So it's either going to be fight, flight, freeze, submit, or attach. So if you have ever like chastised a kid and they're crying and you're like, stop crying, and you're asking them questions and they're like, I don't know, I don't know, I don't know. They really don't know. They're not trying to get out of like that part of their brain is inaccessible. Or if you're upset, you cannot reason and talk with somebody when they are in the height of that curve. You either need to talk to them before or after, not during. Okay, so then we have phobias, certain fears. That's anxiety based. And then some people develop anxiety and or depression or bipolar by substance use. So what are some treatments? You can meditate. Movement is great. Exercising, dancing. You can go to support groups. You can get psychotherapy. We also call that counseling. Some people need medication because, again, I said we were a body. We're physical. We have our soul. We have our spirit. Well, Sometimes when you have certain conditions, it changes the chemistry in your brain. And so some of your neurotransmitter levels are not where they need to be. So the medication helps to help restore that. Doesn't mean you need to be in on your whole life. It does not. You know, might you want to seek holistic alternatives? You can. But you and your provider will need to collaborate to decide that. What is suicide? It's death caused by injuring oneself with the intent to die. It is the leading cause of death in the US. And what is the difference between suicide and suicidality? Suicidality is the risk of suicide. So that includes the thoughts about suicide, if you're coming up with a plan, and any attempts that you've made. So suicide is the actual act. The suicidality is the actual thinking and planning. So mental health and suicide have become a crisis among adolescents and young adults. So what are some facts about suicide? Number one, sleep deprivation. When people aren't sleeping, it influences suicidality. Matter of fact, sleep deprivation influences everything, just the way your body functions naturally, your regular thinking, because you can get brain fog or what have you. Victims and perpetrators of bullying have the highest risk of suicidality. So children, this is another thing that's contributing to that. Talking about suicide, this is a myth. Because some people think if I talk about suicide, it's going to make it worse. That's not true. Talking about suicide does not increase the likelihood of them following through. Suicidal ideation is influenced by the media. Lord, they glorify it in some of the movies. They talk about these zombies, these vampires that present you with this whole like everlasting life. Then you got video games that kind of glorify like you're a hero when you die, or there's some great mysticism or superpower. So people just think, oh, I'm just watching TV. Bible talks about that. You got to guard your gates, but that's a whole different topic. So then there's a trauma of failing. There are a lot of people, children, adults, scared or traumatized of failing because of their history. Like, was I picked on for that? Was I chastised and called names because I didn't get it right? And so that scars people. There's a difference between suicidality between adults and youth. So when we talk about suicidality in youth, you got to remember it's a developmental lag because their brains are developing. So they don't have as much tolerance for stress as we do. Okay, they don't grasp the permanency of suicide because of that. They think, I just need a quick solution and I'm hurting, I want to get out. They don't understand all that comes with that. The behavior is more driven by their hormones, so they make impulsive decisions. And they don't have the ability to control their environment. If you got raised in a very toxic home, right, and you don't have any power to control that, that's going to be more stressful. There are not any screenings, or not a lot of them, for the mental health and emotional needs of children because everything in the past was based on adults. When a student commits suicide, schools will experience a suicide contagion, and it increases the risk of additional suicides or suicidal behavior because of a centralized proximity. I think some people will probably say, oh, it's like a copycat syndrome. Like, why they ever put 13 Reasons Why on the television, I just never understood it because it was all about suicide. What are the risk factors for that? So there are a lot of kids that are struggling with gender identity and confusion. Then we've got unresolved attachment disorders. There's family history of suicide, low self-esteem, legal problems, serious or chronic illness and pain, substance abuse. Is there a history of depression or other mental health illness, violence or victimization, or you can be the perpetrator because we don't ever think about the perpetrator. They too may be struggling. Bullying, death of a parent, immediate family, or a close friend or peer. Concern of disappointing others. If you grew up in that home where you have that critical parent and you're just terrified to let them down. Um, the loss of a relationship or a conflictual relationship, racial disparity, trauma exposure. So it's one of my favorites. You or a person can be traumatized while the mother is carrying them in their womb. So they come out traumatized already. Financial problems, some people just can't handle it. Sense of hopelessness, loneliness, isolation, stress, and discrimination. So, what are the signs? Does this person, are they isolating more? Do they feel disconnected? Have they had a decrease in their motivation or productivity or energy? Have you seen changes in their behavior, sleep, appetite, attitude, or hygiene? Have they lost interest? If they're students, have their grades dropped? Are they hypersensitive? Do you see extreme mood swings? Are they giving away possessions or leaving mementos, making unusual statements? Do you see feelings of hopelessness, rejection, loneliness, being trapped, or them talking about pain? Are they saying goodbye verbally, written, or virtually? Because now people will go like on Facebook, TikTok, what have you, social media platform, leave messages. They have no interest in the future. Increased substance abuse, self harming behavior, a preoccupation with death and dying, or just flat out suicidal threats and attempts. Physically, again, changes in behavior, appetite, or sleep, and the hygiene. Um, do we see anything with paranoia? Are they having anger outbursts? Do they get sudden bursts of energy? Are they just emotional all the time? Tearful, crying all the time, always on edge? Psychomotor agitation, meaning like are they fidgeting and they just can't sit still? Now, don't get me wrong, I know people have ADHD, but again, like we're looking at this in terms of the scope. Rapid or slow speech? Do they seem disorganized? They don't complete tasks. They just have lost any kind of sense of time. They're making poor judgment or decisions. And these are the things that prevent people or have been known to prevent people from seeking help. Affordability or just health insurance, lack thereof, a lack of awareness or understanding, lack of resources, an inability to see the illness because they don't know the signs. People don't know the signs, so you don't realize that somebody's struggling. Embarrassment, demonizing the need. I had went to a church and I think it was the pastor's granddaughter had just attempted suicide, and they just couldn't believe it. Like they were so floored. They just didn't. They just would have never suspected it. So I went out to talk, and it was amazing because when I opened it up for questions, like people just sharing how they had suffered hurt. Like they went to go get help, and when they tried to go to people in the church in this particular story, um, they felt worse than they did when they went, and so they left. We focus on the behavior and the problem instead of the person. Never forget it's a person behind the behavior. Poor receptibility, meaning like, are these people going to receive me or are they going to judge me? Wrong beliefs or faulty beliefs, lack of support. And there's a shortage. There's a shortage of therapists, psychologists, and psychiatrists. Now, before COVID, you would have a hard time, it's about 2 months waiting period to find a psychiatrist for medication because the psychiatrist does your medication, your psychologist does the testing, your therapist does the counseling or the talk therapy. After COVID, now there's a shortage of counselors. Now you're going to wait 2 or 3 months just to see a counselor to talk to. That is what caused that boom with online. Yes. Locally in Gastonia, do y'all know we don't have any free local resources for mental health? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So what happens is people go to the ER and they get there for like what 3 days if they keep them that long, but then there's no long term care. So guess what? Now we have a cycle. Okay. So every county should have a NAMI or an MHA, like Charlotte does. I think Forest City does, but Gaston County does not. Like I never forget. Like, do you guys remember the story of? I think he was a police chief, or he was something in the police, and something happened. He had gone to the church, talked to his pastor about how he was feeling. I don't know, whatever what happened with that. But this, he ran his car into that restaurant and killed his daughter who worked and somewhere and there was no local help. So when he went to the pastor didn't know what to do or where to send him. Probably still struggling depressed. No, ma'am. If you don't pay to go get your help, you don't have a free resource. If you can't drive to Forest City or Charlotte, no, ma'am. I have I tried to launch a chapter here, but you have to actually have a space and you have to secure your own funding to run it. Well, who can do that? Oh, you can go to Charlotte. You can go to yeah. If you can get there, you can go. Hmm. They have a mental health alliance over there and a NAMI. Oh yeah, they give classes. Yes, there's nothing. There's nothing. I tried, but yeah, nobody. I'm just gonna say money hasn't been directed toward it. How about that? Speaking up about it. Like when I tell you the power of the voice, use the power of the voice because when you don't, needs don't get met. With mental illness, a lot of people incarcerated with mental illness, a lot of veterans with mental illness. Yes. Hmm. PTSD all day. Correct. See, I think that's something. And some of this is awareness and education, right? So, like, I'm glad when I have the opportunity in formats like these to provide psychoeducation to raise awareness so that people a can learn how to identify, learn what to say to get the help. Yeah, yeah. Well, what I will say is not just specific to mental health, because I work in a health field, period. But you have got to advocate for yourself because if you don't, nobody else is going to, or if you don't have somebody with you that can ask the right questions and make put the pressure on, they're not gonna do it. Right. And then don't let anybody try to tell you what you don't feel or don't know. Nobody knows your body more than you. If they sitting there telling you it's dizzy and you know that's not it, then say no, that's not it. Now let me get off my soapbox. Oh gosh. Okay. So now because there's a shortage or it's not affordable or we don't have a resource, we get delayed treatment if treated at all. Okay. So the average wait time, like I said, is about 2 to 3 months. Now, according to the NCBI in 2004, the delay between the onset of a mental illness and treatment is 11 years. Hmm. In 2004, they did a study and they found out from the time of the onset of mental illness and the time somebody got treated, it was about 11 years. I, okay, yeah. So, well, you got to realize some people don't realize what's going on. They just know. And for some people, if it's been their whole life, they just think that that's who they are. Oh, that just stressed me out. I hate them comments like that's just how he is, or like no, because listen, if y'all don't hear nothing else I say today, take this with you. That every behavior is the indicator of an unmet need. Nobody is just doing something to just do something. There is a need that is not identified or has not been met. So now the question is not what's wrong with you. The question is what has happened to you or what did not happen for you. Okay? All right. How do you talk to your youth about suicide? Have an open door. Like, don't make it some kind of like, don't talk about it. No, talk about it. We need to talk about it. Ask them for permission to make the decision to get help so they realize that they aren't in a place, because they need to understand you're not in a place to make a decision. Let me help you. Tell them that their safety is important to you. Ask what's causing you so much pain to think that the only solution is death. Because you got to realize when a suicidal person is actively suicidal, they are in unbearable pain. Doesn't matter if you think they're in pain or not. So please don't say that. You shouldn't feel that way. Please don't do that. Because we do that in a minute. I used to do that. Oh God. Yeah. But that does some damage, I promise you. For a mentally fragile person, it's a dangerous thing. Yeah, or tell me what you're feeling, or how can I help you, or to engage in conversation so that they can try to talk it out. Okay. Be a safe space. Oh, I need to scream this like all over gas. Be a safe space, corporately and individually. You don't know who you meet. You might go to the drive-through, and Jim might just be contemplating suicide. And good old smile ministry over here might flash a smile and be like, Jim, how you doing today? And Jim might be like, you know what? You just changed my mind. I was gonna go to this bridge and jump off it. Power of one matters. Nothing just happens. And remember, when people are having suicidal thoughts or their behavior is like what we would call crazy, I hate that word, don't take it personal. Do not take it personal. It has nothing to do with you. It's not an indication of a failure as a parent, but it's the desire of that youth to end their pain, and then they don't want to be a burden. And that's another reason they don't want to talk about it. They don't want to be a burden. So, how do we do effective prevention? So, if you're going to seek intervention and treatment, the modalities have to have the following characteristics to be effective. Know the signs. Make sure you get age appropriate and culturally sensitive screenings. There's got to have an element of problem solving. We need some social emotional learning because do y'all know most people don't even know how to identify their feelings? Well, they don't even recognize it because if I told you right now, if I say, tell me the first word that comes to your mind about depression, what would y'all say? What's the first emotion that you would associate? Sadness. Okay, so then what if I said, did you know that if a person is irritable and angry all the time, that's also depression? So, family-based interventions, you want to preserve dignity while building resiliency. They already feel bad, so don't try to embarrass them. Addressing healthcare disparities and social determinants of health. So, what do I mean? Like, again, when we're talking about impoverished areas, we already know transportation is going to be an issue. You know, if we're getting culturally, somebody's a black and brown person, we already know we need to think about culture. Like, we need those disparities to be considered when we're getting treatment. What are some protective factors? We want family relationships to be healthy. We need community resources, which we don't have right now. We need positive support systems. That can be the family, that can be a friend, that can be your church, that can be a mentor, but somebody that's a safe space that's positive, and accessible and affordable health care. Well, how do you support somebody in distress? Be observant. There are always clues. Know the signs, be empathetic, do not judge. Again, a behavior is an indication of an unmet need. And again, ask what happened to you or what did not happen for you. What about communication? Realize communication is verbal and nonverbal. Approach. You need to meet them at their level. If they hear, why are you up here talking? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's the question. It could. And yep, something today might have just triggered it and reminded them. Mm-hmm.
And that's why, and that's why what you said is very important. That COVID just brought stuff
To the
out
surface.
that's been there
Mm-hmm.
all along. We see it everywhere. And I've been saying that COVID, God allowed COVID to happen because there's a lot of things that needed to be addressed. Okay? A lot of people say, oh, COVID's so bad. No, things needed to be brought to the light, to be discussed, so that people can get to the place where they have a stable mental health.
Mm-hmm. Yes, ma'am.
And repeat what she said because they can't hear you. Because she never like, no, I was going to say, no, she was going to. I was saying that I was expounding on what my mom was saying about it's not, do not make it personal. So don't tell the person that they're selfish when it comes to that because you're bothered and don't understand why they feel what they feel. Don't say, oh, it's selfish of you to make this decision because what about your family? What about this? What about me? What about the person that's going through it? So it kind of puts them at this crossroads. And now they're like, well, I feel like this. And then I'm like, well, I don't want to disappoint them. It goes back. It's a nasty cycle. And so they become, it's like they just sit in this stuck spot feeling crazy because they're like, well, dang, I do kind of want to go. But then I'm like, well, anguish that I'm going to cause them because of what they said. That's all.
Yes, it is. Mhm. A young person of a therapist. Okay. So we're not exempt.
Exactly.
Okay. Yes, ma'am. Okay. Ooh, that's touchy. You know what? I'm going. Ooh. Because you know what? So this is what I want to say. Lord, why are we in this arena tonight? I did not. I really did not, because I'm trying to stay in my lane. Oh, but y'all not helping me. Um, because number one, the whole concept of being closeted tells me that there is an underlying factor of shame. So now you say, well, where did the shame come from? I'm going to tell you there's some intergenerational trauma coded in your DNA that made you feel like I'm a less of a person if I say something, because as a slave, that made me vulnerable and that gets passed on. Now, yes, we do need to ask for help, but now this reinforces what I said a little earlier about creating a safe space and knowing how to approach it and meeting somebody where they are. Right. So if somebody is struggling with that's what I'm like, verbal, nonverbal. Because somebody can say one thing with their mouth, but their facial expression, gestures, body language tells me something totally different. So I may not walk up to you and say, "Hey, sister, you depressed?" No, I might just strike up a general conversation with you, but I might realize that you hold your head down or that your shoulders are tense. And I'll be like, life is stressful. And just open a conversation. And then when that person's defenses are coming down, and I'll be like, well, have you thought about, would you like some information? and always empowering that person so they feel like it's a choice. I've not belittled them, I've not embarrassed them, I've accepted them for who they are, where they are, and just been a support to offer resources. Okay. Mm-hmm. Yep. Communication. And here's a secret: the average person, they don't know why they feel the way themselves. Listen, y'all not gonna get me in no trouble up in here today. Now, y'all not. Lying. Lying. No. Yes, ma'am. Because it's an invisible illness, right? Because people feel like, physical sickness, you can see it on somebody. But I can't look at you twitch and know that you got all kind of things going on because you smiling, you dancing, you got high energy, and I'm dying inside. Mm. Oh, yep. Mm-hmm. 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 They are people. At the end of the day, they are people. Hmm. When you are communicating, you want to be aware of proximity because we all have a personal bubble. You don't want to touch people without permission because if I got trauma, you don't know, you might get slapped with a sudden move because I'm just get triggered. You don't know. Okay. When you're talking, you don't want to be long and drawn out and philosophical. I need you to be short, concise, and simple because remember, this part of my brain is not available. So, how do you support? Know the barriers. I'm going to give you some do's and don'ts. Know, friend, when to go get some help because you say they need to know and ask. They got to know when to go at some help and have a positive support system. Do's, listen. I didn't say talk, I said listen. Accept them for how they are, where they are. Respect their feelings. You cannot say to me, if I tell you I'm sad, please do not tell me you're not sad. You don't think I should be sad. Yeah, like no. Be observant. Don't just notice bad things. Talk about some good things you see about me. Yes. Make observations, engage student, person, whoever, in small talk so that we can do some investigating to see what's the need. If you're concerned, ask if they need help and let them know they're not alone. Create a safe space and a secure environment where they can openly communicate without fear of negative consequences. Listen, oh, sister, if I come to you, I better not hear my name across that pulpit or not my name or a description of what I'm going through. Oh, I know what happens. This is why I said it. Like, just now, you just put me on the room board and display. Now I feel horrible. Now I think everybody is looking at me crazy.
When my own experience, you go and you feel like you can confide in certain people, talk to people, because you have certain ministries in the church where we're supposed to collectively be together, support one another, and you go and you open up and you talk, And now your business is all over everywhere else that you don't want it to be. And then not only that, people begin to treat you differently. And that's why people don't share. And that's why people disconnect themselves from the church and from certain groups in the church. And they just do their own thing and go do what they do. Or don't do anything at all.
Okay. Reassure them of support and unconditional love. Advocate for yourself, advocate for your children. So, again, you want somebody that is culturally sensitive because let's just face it, there are just nuances within our culture. And everybody's not familiar with those nuances. Your Lord, this is another one. I need to have it coined. Your job is to support, not to fix. Please quit trying to fix people. Just support them so they feel empowered and maintain their sense of dignity. Do not touch without permission or be aggressive. You need to watch the tone of your voice. Don't judge. Watch your body language. Give options of choice, but no more than 2 or 3 because you don't want somebody to be overwhelmed. Don't take behaviors personally. Remember, children don't know how to identify or express their feelings, so that's normally why they act out. Do not try to problem solve when somebody is upset. Do not say, if somebody dies by suicide, don't say they committed suicide because you're indicating they willingly did that, right? Like, even though they did it, you're saying, like, this was just something they wanted to do. So, in other words, you want to say they died by suicide. It's the wording. Words are powerful. Do not demonstrate the same level of intolerance as clients. So that means you got to check yourself because it's so easy. You try to talk to somebody and then they push a button and before you know it, you done got caught up your own self. Yep. And so if you are a parent, I tell my parents when I talk to my parents, listen, know when to tap out. Go get your spouse. Like, you know what? I need you to come on over, take my place because I can't maintain right now. Know your own limits. When do you get help? When you feel hopeless or overwhelmed, you can't get relief or rest, you don't know what to do, or you're having suicidal thoughts or self harming behavior. Parents, model the behavior you want to see. Some adults need that too. Conduct daily check ins to foster community and build resiliency. Remember again, behavior is an indicator of an unmet need. Use strength based interventions. Remind yourself or your youth that they're safe. Normalize and validate feelings. That's a part of who you are. Offer restitution so a child can fix the problem or redeem themselves. We're so good about punishment, but you know what? We don't need to punish. We need to discipline. There's a difference. If you punish me, you're just giving me some kind of negative consequence and I'm not learning anything. If you discipline, then you're teaching me what was wrong and what's right. And if I offer you restitution, I'm giving you a way to make it right so you can redeem yourself. Have a support network. Practice self-care. I am a huge advocate of self-care. You got to be self-aware, know your limits. I mean, it is in my schedule. And I keep that appointment for myself like I honor any other appointment. No, I'm not changing my appointment. I am going to go get my nails done, period. We can talk after that. Okay? And here are you some resources, not local, but here go some resources for you to have. And that's the end of my presentation, ma'am. Mhm. Okay. So again, I have a local practice called Roundtable Coaching and Consulting. Oh God, what don't I do? I do individual couples counseling. I see children. I do presentations. I do workshops, um, public speaking. So yeah, just call me and ask. That just be your best. Just call me and ask. Okay. And thank you all who tuned in on via Facebook. We're going to now cut the feed so we can have some Q&A. Thank you so much.